Welcome to Fantasy and Faith. Recently, I did an interview with Adrian Tchaikovsky, and he mentioned something along the lines of most writers write fantasy characters or characters in their stories with very surface level faith. They wear faith like a costume, where they pay lip service perhaps, but it's all superficial.
Religion tends to turn up a lot in fantasy, but it tends to turn up extremely shallowly. You normally, it is frequent. You'll get a religion, and it will perform a certain plot function, such as, for example, one very common trope is there's something in it a bit like the Roman Catholic Church, and they are usually the bad guys, and they have an inquisition and so forth. And then, if you look at the book carefully, there's no indication really of why they believe anything. Or how any of this comes. It's just kind of like this big Roman Catholic Church-shaped chunk that's wedged rather uncomfortably into a fantasy world. And similarly with other sort of religions, it's frequently a bit hazy as to why the religion is there, what it believes, how it works, or anything like that. And
characters should show their faith through all of their actions, not just on the surface. So what does it mean to truly embody belief in fiction? In today's episode, we're going to explore authentic portrayals of faith. Is a superficial way of dealing with faith where you have a character that maybe prays once in the entire story, or they go to church one time and they talk briefly to God in the church, and then that's it. That's all you see. One-time prayer is not embodied belief. So let me give you an example. You have a warrior. Picture the scene. You've got a warrior putting on his armor. He's putting on his chest plates and breastplates and tightening up the straps, putting on his greaves, putting on his pauldrons. And then just before he leaves his tent, he kneels down by a small altar and sends one prayer for victory, and then gets up and walks out. And throughout the story, that's the only time you see him going to pray or praying in any shape or form. That's superficial prayer. How about instead, if he is shown throughout being conflicted about what he is doing? Maybe the church or the clergy have sent a bunch of men or an army to the borders to fight a savage heathen horde that's coming to supposedly overrun the country, kill all the men and women and children. But something's off about what they're doing. Maybe they've got some kind of other motive to send these people out there to kill these approaching people who are coming over. Okay, so maybe he's conflicted about that. Maybe the warrior is conflicted about bringing more death and destruction. Maybe he's conflicted and has a dilemma that in the past he's killed so many people, and he wants to move away from that. He wants to make amends, but the only thing he's good at is fighting. So they get sent out time and time again to go kill more and more people. So these dilemmas normally have a grounding in faith. So maybe the person believes that killing is wrong because in their religion, killing any person or anything is considered something ill, something bad, something that will bring you bad karma later down the road. And as a result, he sees a duality between serving the clergyman or the church in carrying out these wars and battles, but at the same time, he also feels that he has a duty to do what he's been asked to do. So let's take, for example, Ned Stark in Game of Thrones. Ned is shown as being a man of honor, and he holds to that honor like it's his central belief, right? He even goes as far as dying for his honor. But what is the source of his honor? Is it just a family tradition? Is it just something that is associated with living in the North? Or is there something deeper to it? We know that within the Song of Ice and Fire series, there are different religions at play. There's the old gods of the Weirdwoods, there's the new gods, and there's the Dothrakis. They have their religion. So, what is the source of his honor? Let's take the religion of the Starks. They pay homage to the old gods. So whenever they're taking oath, they tend to go to the Weirwood and take their oath. So we see Jon Snow go to the Weirdwood and take his oath to the Night's Watch. So that is some aspect of religion there. But then throughout the rest of it, you don't really see him do anything religious. Yeah, there's still those themes where one of his brothers is being possessed or taken over by some ancient spirits. So maybe you could argue that that is partly religion. On the other hand, look at the Dothraki. They seem to be a quite savage, barbaric people. Their religion seems a bit more simplistic, but they do things because it's prophecy driven. They have wise women, they have their religious ceremonies, they have their host god, their sun and moon gods, and um, they believe them strong enough that their entire way of life is centered around fulfilling these prophecies. Now, if you have a Muslim character in your story, you've got to remember that they don't just pay lip service to the religion, they see every action through a religious lens. Everything they do is done through the religion. So let's take two examples, right? You have a Muslim warrior, they're going to have a strong bond with the religion, but um, they may still have to go out and fight because there are certain situations within the Islamic religion where you are permitted to go and fight. So, for instance, if you are being attacked, you are allowed to defend yourself. If the weak are being oppressed, you're allowed to go defend them. If the holy sites are being attacked, you're allowed to go defend the holy sites. So there's different situations where battle and violence is allowed. However, it's also a religion in which the Prophet Muhammad said that to kill one person is as if you have killed the entire humanity. And if you were to save one person, it's as if you have saved the entirety of humanity. So there's also this duality there. So you have to balance one with the other. So on one hand, it's good to be good at the craft of being a warrior, but at the same time, you have to be mindful that you're part of a religion of peace and that um, using violence is considered bad. Therefore, you have to take that into account when you are crafting your character, that there may be a peace-loving person who just happens to be really good at war. What if you have a spaceman, a Muslim spaceman? They're going off into the cosmos. How would they go about um, practicing their faith? So straight away you've got conflict there. If you're leaving the planet, you're going to be um, you'll have that dilemma of I'm leaving behind my family. That's the normal thing that you'll see. Like if you think Interstellar, the main character is leaving behind his daughter and his son, and he's conflicted about that he may never see them again. In fact, the chances of him seeing them again are very, very slim. Okay, so you have that for every character anyway. But for a Muslim, you can add another layer. They're also going away from the planet upon which Mecca is. Mecca is the direction that Muslims pray. It's the place where we go to perform our pilgrimages. Um, our daily prayers are set based upon the position of the sun. So when, for instance, when the sun is just about to rise and you see first light, you read the morning prayer. When the sun is past the halfway point, you read the afternoon prayer. When the sun has just set, you can still see redness in the sky, we read our evening prayer. And then when the sun has completely gone, there's no light in the sky, we read a night prayer. So our daily routines are based off of the position of the sun. So our spaceman is heading off into space. If he's within the solar system, I mean, it's not an insurmountable problem. There are solutions. So if he's within the solar system, he would just face the direction of Earth and do his prayers like that. If there is no night and day schedule, normally astronauts keep their own timings. So whatever they think of as morning, that would be morning. Whatever they think as night, that would be night. So you spread out your prayers like that. If you land on another planet, it becomes a bit more difficult because which way is Earth? So you'll have to get a sighting on where Earth is, or use your tools to find out where Earth is, and then face that direction. If you were in prayer, then that planet will have its night and day cycle. So you'd have to plan your prayers out according to the position of the sun as seen from that planet. If you leave the solar system, then you face towards our solar system. Therefore, you still have a direction for prayer. So these are things that you consider. How do you bring something like this into a story, though? Do you start off with big descriptions of mosques and churches in your fantasy worlds, or start off with a description of, um, how a person is praying towards Earth? So there's two ways of going about this. Now, the first way is that you describe the religion in detail as part of your world building. This isn't a very good way of showing your audience or your reader how faith is part of their daily rituals. What you should do instead is show the faith through small things. So, for instance, if in Alauddin, the city is set in the empty quarter, so surrounded by deserts. There's very little in the way of water. Now, I can describe nice fountains and rivers and lakes that have been artificially created by the king to show his power over the people and over the land. That's one way of doing it, right? But it's better that I show in a different way. So, for instance, if I show the women of the city, the Habia, getting up in the morning, going to these large cisterns in a public square, washing clothes using rocks to beat the clothes on, and using homemade soap made out of animal fats, olive oil, mint, and honey. This is better. Why? Because not only have I shown that there is water is scarce, but there is access to water for the public, which suggests that this is quite a powerful city and a wealthy city. Um, I also show some of the local produce there as well. They have access to animal fat, so they have animals, they have livestock. Olive oil, so they must have olive trees or be importing olives. Honey and mint. These are things that are cultivated locally. Therefore, they're full enough supply that they are using them in things like soap. So this has revealed more about the world without me actually having to say, "Well, this is the horticulture of the society. These are the kinds of livestock they have. This is what a public square looks like." Yes, you describe those things as they're revealed to your characters. So I could describe a mosque, or I could show my character Aladdin, um, going to a public fountain, performing his ablution, thinking about how relaxed and peaceful he feels as he's doing his ablution. Is walking towards the mosque. He's joining throngs of other people. The feeling of brotherhood and fellowship that he might be feeling. Um, he's doing his prayers. He's feeling um, spiritually uplifted, and at the same time grounded in his identity as being a believer, being a servant of God, and therefore um, doesn't have that arrogance within him because he's bowing his head in front of a higher power. That shows you, how embedded it is within the character. So show um, religious belief and faith by embodying it within your characters, by showing it through daily rituals rather than just outlining it and giving us the big picture. Another concept within Islam is tawakkul, trust in God's will. So you can use this as a narrative driver as well, because a good Muslim or any Muslim is constantly trying to increase their level of tawakkul, trust in God's will. So when something good happens, they turn to God. When something bad happens, they turn to God. No matter what is going on in their lives, they think of it as this is from God. There's probably something good in this for me, even though on the face of it, it may seem bad. So this is another concept we can use. I want to give you an example from the Changeling King. So I have the book right here. I'm going to read a small section of it, and then I'm going to break it down a little bit. The tiger stood suddenly, facing the exit. Every line in his body illustrated alarm. The yipping barks of a team of dogs carried over the distance to Sultan. The tiger threw an accusatory look at him. He had led the hunters to his lair. The beast dropped to his haunches. The hunters thrashed about for several hours. The hunting dogs had gone mad the minute they had picked up the tiger's scent. The beast stayed low, but remained alert. Sultan knew it was just a matter of time before they came upon the cave. When a hunter finally exclaimed over his discovery, the tiger churned out of the cave and attacked. Sultan pressed himself further back into the shadow. The hunter screamed in terror, but was abruptly silenced. Shouts of alarm were followed by the clatter of arrows against rock. Sultan listened quietly, picturing in his head the beast's struggle for survival. The big cat snarled and snapped bones. Men cursed and cried out in pain. "Muskets!" someone shouted. "Shoot the damn creature!" They opened fire. The tiger roared. Silence. Something primal rose up in Sultan's stomach, urging him to charge out like the tiger and face his enemies. Sense soon prevailed, and he remained hidden where he was. Above him, the hunters debated who should take the tiger's head and hide as a trophy. "What about the cave?" asked the man with the gravelly voice, interrupting the debate. "What about it?" "Shouldn't we check it?" "Why? Do you really think you'll find anything alive in the lair of a man-eating tiger?" "The prince is a seasoned hunter and would have steered well clear of a tiger's hunting ground." "Maybe he's counting on us thinking that. Maybe he's counting on us thinking that, but really he's hiding nearby." "That is impossible." "Fine, set up a patrol in this area. In fact, you can lead it yourself. Take 3 days' provision and see if anyone will volunteer to join you. If the prince doesn't show up by then, return to Azamabad and report to His Excellency, Abdul Fadl. The rest of us will press on and see if we can pick up his trail on the way to Kashmir." Sultan silently cursed the man for his obstinacy. He would have to skulk in the cave for a while longer. Eventually, the main body of the hunting party moved on up the mountains. Throat, as Sultan decided to call him, had remained behind with 3 other footsore lancers. To his disgust, the 4 lancers set up camp a few meters above the cave mouth and began exchanging crude jokes while they ate. Sultan returned to his meditation. As time wore on, he began to realize the full extent of his troubles. Gravelthroat and his select group of slackers had no intention of commencing a patrol. They seemed fully intent on lazing on the mountainside for the 3 days they had been given. Sultan's stomach cramped from hunger, but he was resolute not to touch the now maggot-infested leavings of the tiger. The sheikh had taught him that a salik, a true seeker of enlightenment, with practice could sustain himself on the remembrance of God alone. When Sultan questioned how this was possible, the sheikh had responded with a riddle. "The sustenance of every man, woman, and child is a responsibility that God has taken upon himself. So whether one believes that he is providing for himself, or is being provided through another, it is God who really is the provider. I do not understand. How is one sustained without provision? My child, sustenance, as with many other things, does not have to be seen, smelt, or indeed tasted for one to receive it. Even then Sultan had not understood, but chose not to press the Sheikh any further on the matter. Over time, he had begun to understand that there was much more to the world than could be perceived by the five senses. The Sheikh had opened his eyes to this hidden world. Sultan settled into a cross-legged position, back straight, hands resting palms up on his thighs. Slowly, his body temperature fell to match that of the cave. His heartbeat slowed until it was in step with his breathing, as he silently chanted the Lord's name of power. The alternation of day and night soon lost meaning for Sultan. His ears no longer registered sounds, and the stench of engorged maggots was inconsequential. Sultan travelled ever deeper inward, cocooned from the hurts and aches of the world around him. Emptiness filled his mind as his spirit soared high above the mountains, the clouds, the cosmos beyond. After 2.5 days of sleeping and eating, Gravelthorpe's curiosity overcame his laziness. As Gravelthorpe lowered himself through the cave opening, Sultan crossed space and time until he entered the atmosphere of a distant world. Gravelthorpe ducked into the cave and tore through the bones of the tiger's last meal. Sultan's spirit rushed to the surface towards an island that lay west of a large continent. Gravelthorpe peered into the gloom of the cave, wishing he had brought a torch with him, or had waited until morning. Sultan hit water and went under, his mouth filled with foul liquid and mud. He lurched awake, coughing to clear his lungs. Gravelthorpe crouched at the back of the cave. There was nothing here. Disappointed, he made his way out and told his fellows that they would leave for Azimabad in the morning. Sultan looked about. He sat hip-deep in a bog, far removed from any mountain. A large dollop of rain splashed hard on the crown of his head. He looked up at an alien night sky, crackling with energy of an oncoming lightning storm. The reeds that grew on the edge of the bog parted. The massive head of a horned reptile snaked towards him. Sultan yelled in terror and scrambled backwards. Lightning flashed as the lizard stalked forward, revealing a demon mounted upon his back. Sultan shrieked once again. So that was from The Changing King. Now, within that section, I describe Sultan's meditations is trusting God whilst hiding in a tiger's cave. The tiger wasn't a tame tiger. It wasn't his pet tiger. It was an actual tiger that would have ripped him apart. But his spiritual awareness and training made him less of a target to the tiger. In fact, the tiger was calmed by God's will. In previous chapters, I explored briefly his spiritual training, how his development started, and I refer back to it in this section as well, where he's having a conversation with his sheikh, his master in spirituality, telling him about mysticism in a way that it would get Sultan to contemplate it more. Then his hunger, his desperation, allows him to enter a higher level of spiritual awareness. He's engaged in the remembrance of God, Allah, 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 which we call zikr in Urdu and dhikr in Arabic. This leads to a transformative experience for him. He feels himself spiritually traveling, exiting the planet, traveling across the cosmos, and then arriving in another world. But it's not just a spiritual journey. In essence, his physical being has been transported across the cosmos to this other planet. Hey, you're still here? Maybe you should hit the subscribe button now. This other planet. Okay. So this scene illustrates how not only does he embody his faith, but how his faith becomes a central part of his transformation, of his travel to another world, so leading to a miraculous outcome. So let's look a bit more at the rituals and daily practices. So I've given you an example already of how Aladdin may prepare himself for prayers. You can look at it to another level as well, how your daily rituals and routines are based around your faith. So a Muslim spends the entire day organizing it around the prayer times. When they leave work in the morning, they're already thinking of when will I read my afternoon prayer? Um, should I do my ablution before I set off? Do I have space or a place at work where I can do ablutions? Can I go to a local mosque for 5-10 minutes to do my prayers there? So it's part of our thinking. It's not just an afterthought. Oh, it's prayer time. Maybe I should pray. So, for instance, I go to work. I have a prayer mat with me when I go to work, so I can use the conference room or a meeting room to do my prayers when it's time. I'm aware of where I can perform my ablution. Um, how can I minimize the impact on other people? So, for instance, when I'm washing my feet, I put down paper towels on the floor so my wet feet don't leave a puddle. I make sure I scrub the floor afterwards to make sure there's no standing water there. So these are all small actions that a Muslim is going to go through on a daily basis. These are part and parcel of who they are. It's an embodiment of the religion. So think about how you can bring these more immersive experiences into your world building. Okay. Have your warrior, your knight, or your space explorer think about how they are practicing the faith. Think about the dilemmas that they have or the difficulties they may be having. So, for instance, if you're on a school trip, right? Um, maybe you're there as a student, maybe there as a teacher, you're going to be worried throughout the day of how am I going to get my prayers in? How am I going to explain to my classmates what I'm doing? How am I going to make sure that the kids are looked after? Do I have enough cover that I can go off and do my prayers? Am I going to have to do my prayers in front of them? Um, should I take a bottle of water with me so I can do my ablution somewhere if there's no access to a wash area? So you got to think about these uh, details and the thinking, the inner thoughts of your characters, the dilemmas that they might be having around carrying out these actions. Um, so that's ablution, prayer, reflection. Um, so the things that you're involved in. So, for instance, if your character works in an office, um, and they're meeting somebody new, is a male Muslim character, and the other person that he's meeting is a female non-Muslim character. She sticks out her hand. He starts thinking, do I shake hands to avoid the awkwardness of explaining that why I can't shake hands with a woman? Or do I go ahead and explain myself as a sorry, I can't shake hands with you. Um, it goes against my religious beliefs. I'm not allowed to physically touch a woman I'm not married to or who is not directly related to me, right? So there was a recent kind of a media frenzy around Khabib, the UFC, the former UFC champion, um, when he refused to shake hands with the journalist. Now, she didn't seem too fussed about it because he probably explained to her later on that this is what the situation was. But then later on, it was made into a bigger issue than it was. Right? People were accusing him of being misogynistic. Now, this isn't misogyny. To avoid touching a woman that you're not married to or you're not related to is a show of respect, right? Is avoiding that um, subjectification of the female form. Okay, so it's like saying, okay, your body is yours. Um, I'm not going to touch you in any way. I'm not going to stare at you. I'm not going to pass suggestive comments to you. I'm going to avoid innuendo when I'm talking to you. So as a result, it creates this kind of moat of safety around the individual, and on the long run, it makes people more comfortable around that person. How is faith tested in moments of violence, war, or cosmic travel? So I've given you examples again um, about what that might look like for a warrior. So we talked a bit about how a warrior might be conflicted about his place as a warrior, his role, what he does, and his personal beliefs, maybe. So there's conflict there. So, for instance, if we look at a situation in the world, like the situation in Palestine, there's Muslims all around the world, and probably non-Muslims as well, who want to go and help those people, the Palestinians. There's probably people who want to go and fight to defend those Palestinians from further harm, from being slaughtered, from being starved. But there are issues with people just traveling. There are local laws, right? The national laws. There's international laws that might prevent them from traveling to another country to fight. There's foreign governments who will threaten them along the way. So, for instance, America might decide to sanction them, their families might get arrested whilst they've gone out to travel to this other country. Yes, there are double standards because when it comes to Ukraine, there wasn't as much um, said about it. People were going to fight there. People are still there fighting. Um, but when they return, nothing will happen. Yes, a law was passed to say that no one can go and engage in battle out there, but there are individuals who have traveled, and we know this. We've talked briefly about how if a person is traveling to space, some of the adaptations they're going to have to make. But even with the adaptations, you have to remember these are compromises. This isn't the best way to practice the faith. So when somebody, like if a Muslim becomes an astronaut, they take this into consideration that they won't be able to do the prayers in the way they are used to. They won't be able to compete complete Ramadan fasting in the way they used to during the month of Ramadan because time and space is going to be different. Um, just think about it, like the difficulties an astronaut would have performing the evolution. I mean, water doesn't behave the same way in zero G as it does on the planet, right? So it can lead to some comedic scenes as well, right? Or when the character is doing their prayers and they go down to prostrate, they might accidentally push off the floor too hard and end up spinning around, um, which will create more problems. So think about the barriers and obstacles your character will face in performing their religious duties and their rituals. Okay. Um, what would you do? Fasting cycle, you decide yourself, okay, this much time has passed. So if you're on another planet, it's going to have its own kind of lunar and solar cycles. Um, in on our planet, Ramadan is, I think, the 10th month of the year, of the Islamic year. And because the lunar calendar is shorter than the solar calendar, that moves through the year, right? So, 10 years ago, Ramadan was in July, August. Now, currently, it's starting in February next year, I think, and then in March. So we have this natural movement through the year so that Ramadan um, is changing. The length of the fast is changing for those people who don't live along the equator or um, live high up in the north or further down south. And there are unique challenges if you are on a different planet because the solar year or solar calendar or the lunar calendar might be very different. For instance, if there's multiple moons, that might play havoc with how you would design a lunar calendar. If the solar year is longer than 365 days, you might have to consider how long a month is. So instead of 30 days of fasting, you might end up doing 40 days of fasting. Um, some places, like for instance, Barrow in Alaska, they have couple of months of dark. So how do you pray in that? How do you decide what times to do your prayers? Or they may have a couple of months where you don't get sunset. You're in a twilight kind of stage where the sun hasn't fully disappeared beneath the horizon. So it's light enough that you could do any kind of activity that you would do normally during the daytime. So in these situations, there are special allowances. You've got to decide how long a normal day would be. So you might decide that a normal day is 14 hours, and therefore uh, you will fast from, say, for instance, 4 a.m. in the morning until about 6 p.m. in or 8 p.m. in the evening, and then open your fast like that. So you would have to make these kind of adjustments if you were on another planet and the day and night cycles are different. You have to decide how you're going to do it. If in the obviously if you're in space, then that's what you do. You set your times and you live according to those times. You do your prayers according to those times that you've set yourself. You will fast according to those times. So there is still a way of practicing your faith, even if you are on an interstellar mission to go to another solar system, to another star system, um, or even cross to another galaxy. You still will have a way of dealing with it. So think about what those barriers are for your character. Okay. How do you write authentic characters of faith? You've got to do your research, first of all. So most religious systems or identities that you have, even in fantasy fiction, are analogs of real world religions, existing religions, past religions. They're there so you can um, study them, research them, and then build your own made up religion in your um, mythical world. Avoid using stereotypes, right? Um, Stuff like the Christian priest who is having a crisis of faith. We've seen that done to death ever since The Exorcist hit our screens. We've had lots of examples of that character, right? Um, Religious characters don't have to be rigid and stern. They can be relaxed, they can be humorous, they can be comedic even. Um, Religion, there's allowance in religion for that kind of different expression as well. So avoid those kind of stereotypes. Try to deep dive into the psyche of these people, of what their worldview is, um, what their traumas are, what their moral dilemmas are, and try to make them as human as possible. Um, Show an evolution of belief for your characters. Nobody stays the same, right? We are constantly growing. Everything we do, no matter how many times we do that thing, is slightly changed by our past experiences of doing that one thing. So, for instance, if you spend your entire life going sitting under a tree and nothing happened, you will be quite comfortable. But some days you might be attacked by flies, some days you might be attacked by ants, or you may get a bird doing droppings on you, or you might have an encounter with an annoyed squirrel. So, all of these little experiences feed into what you are thinking when you sit down beneath a tree. Same goes for any kind of religious practice. We are constantly changing our experience. Our understanding and our level of faith is constantly changing. Okay. So show that in your character. What is their spiritual journey? And this will add another layer of development for your characters to make them more three-dimensional rather than 2D characters. So maybe they have they're having some experience of enlightenment when they're doing something along a major plot point in your story. Maybe they're having a crisis of faith when somebody dies close to them. Maybe they have that why did you take them, God? Why didn't you take me instead moment? A lot of um, people who become atheist or agnostic I mean, a lot of people become atheist agnostic because they don't feel connected to their religion, right? Some people become quite evangelical about atheism when they've had a loss where somebody close to them died, or when they see some kind of suffering within the world. But if you look at the Palestinian people, they're going through the worst thing we could possibly imagine, and despite that, they hold on to their faith. So there's a difference in how we experience our faith and um, how we might react to different situations. Okay, or maybe they have a kind of a spiritual epiphany at the the high point of the plot, or at the climax of the plot. Maybe the big thing isn't that they've defeated the enemy or they've thrown down the Dark Lord. Maybe it's that they've gained a new spiritual awareness of themselves, of their place in the universe, of God, and that allows them to win the day. So test your characters through trial, reveal their spiritual depths, reveal their weak areas, um, test their patience. So these are, again, within Islam, I've talked about tawakkul, but there are other things like sabr, which is patience, ihsan, fortitude, gratitude. When something goes wrong, are they showing fortitude? Are they being patient in that situation? Are they treating people kindly even though they have the upper hand? Are they showing gratitude when they are given small things at times of hardship, or big things at times of ease? So we have a tendency to uh, think that when good things happen, it's because we've done something, and that's why good things happening to us. Or when something bad happens, we tend to externalize it and say, "Well, it's that person's fault or that person's fault," right? Everything is from God. That's something that Muslims believe, but we don't look to blame anyone. When something bad happens, it's a test from God. It's a trial. We have to show patience, right? Um, God's given us lots of blessings. We have to be grateful for those, even if things are going bad right now, right? If the worst happens, I die, somebody close to me dies, that is another test from God. It's something that I will gain the reward for in the hereafter. It's something that may, in the long run, have some good for me. Okay. So to conclude, religion should be embodied, not superficial. Engage your characters in daily rituals, dilemmas, spiritual journeys that shows their spiritual development, their beliefs, and embodies the faith that they have. Okay. If you are writing a story right now, or if you are thinking about the plot and doing your world building, have a think about how you would put that into practice. What I would like you to do is, if you are happy to, discuss it in the comments. I will try and give you some kind of feedback on whether I feel you're doing it right, or whether there's things that you could improve, or maybe you just need a bit of advice to help you ground your character a bit more. In the next episode, in the next episode, I will have James Barclay, author of the Chronicles of the Raven. He's been writing for 25 plus years. Is one of British fantasy's best authors, best known authors, as a member of the British Fantasy Society, and quite often compared to David Gemmell as the heir to heroic fantasy. So there's that to look forward to. I've got a whole bunch of other writers joining me soon over the coming weeks, and so you've got lots to look forward to. In the meantime, hit like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. So until then, keep dreaming, keep writing, let your story shine.